Music Matters, and today we are lucky enough to be joined by the great Shamir. How are you doing, my friend?
Can't complain. It's been a pretty chill couple of days at least. So
Yeah, can't complain about that. Chill is good. Everybody's feeling a lot of chill lately.
you know.
All right. How's the release of the last album cycle been for you? I imagine the past couple of months have been kind of crazy. Has it been hectic? How's it been?
Well, the past couple of months have been fine. I was pretty much out of the clear as far as the last album cycle by like January after I released the last video for Diet. And then I finally kind of feel like I'm out of the clear for that now, but still doing like small, like little like other things like I mean, I'm sure I can say it now because it'll probably be out by the time this comes out, but like Friday, like I'm announcing like the launch of my like streetwear capsule collection brand. And like and then also just like stuff that I'm like working on with like other artists that I work with for my label and just like small other things that don't really have to do with me aside from like finishing the next album, which is like already written and like being mixed right now. So right now it's just like a bunch of just like actual work and like less like promotional stuff.
Is that kind of a nice escape, like opposed to like being on top of everything, like directly correlated to your music, like maybe getting a little bit, I don't know, I don't want to say removed, but because you're still very much like
Yeah, we moved though. Like, and yeah, that is a nice escape, especially for me because I'm self-managed and so I mean, doing a bunch of press stuff is already hard on an artist, let alone a solo artist. Like at least bands usually get to like chop it up or like, or at least share the burden of like interviews and like everything. So it's like I'm already a solo artist and self-managing and already like work with other artists and release other artists and like everything. So when I am kind of like in promotional cycle for myself, it does feel kind of overwhelming, more so than like if I'm just like, helping another artist like go through a cycle or like do something else, you know what I mean? Like I'm still like kind of like removed and like don't have to like actually do the interviews or like, all those things.
also I feel like when it's your own stuff, it's so like I don't want to say other artists you're working with is a little even more moved, but it's almost like if you do something wrong, that's on you.
Mhm.
Opposed to when you're working with another artist, at least there's a little bit of separation there, but you're kind of on top of yourself in that sense, especially for you because you're your own manager, you're being your own label, you're doing all this stuff for yourself. I would imagine that's a lot of pressure.
But I'm really good about being on top of myself, honestly. Like it is really easy for me to like discipline myself. And I actually, in a weird way, prefer it in a lot of ways because like I think when I kind of like put that responsibility on to like someone else, I just start to get a lot more lackadaisical than if I was than if I was to just already kind of just like apply myself. So I that's kind of like one of the good things about self-managing. And I think um as I said to a lot of people, it's no coincidence that like kind of like my career had this like kind of like second resurgence after I started like self-managing and like started doing everything myself because I was able to like kind of like have this like self or apply this like self-discipline that I already always kind of like had in myself, but was like honestly like a little scared because I think self-discipline is hard for like anyone, right? And I think finding the balance of kind of like applying the self-discipline in like a healthy way or like basically working yourself crazy is really hard. And I think luckily since I've had like some of the more one of the more better, shockingly, despite the pandemic and everything, one of the more like better mental health years for myself and like everything, like I don't know, I think I just finally struck that balance and like I know how to like give myself a mental health day or like calm down or like, know when I'm like overworking myself and like know when to say no, you know what I mean?
Can you talk a little more about like that business side of music? Because we have a lot of independent artists who actually like follow our page and like to learn about how to like manage themselves. And you're a perfect example of that because you've already been like reached pretty high acclaim for your work, and then you've been also been really successful in kind of like managing your own bit, like your own yourself. So can you like speak a little bit more to that? Like, do you think you need to go to school to learn how to do that, or is that just stuff you pick up in the field?
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to go to school for that at all, but it does require experience. And I just, I don't know, out the gate, like, if you don't have music industry experience, do I recommend like self-managing? No, I mean, we all have to start somewhere. So a lot of us are self-managing out the gate, obviously. But I think, I think it's definitely like if you have the opportunity to get management early on in your career, I don't think it's like necessary to like forego to like kind of like save face or money or like whatever, you know what I mean? Because it is nice to have like some kind of guidance. And I don't think I would be able to self-manage myself now if I didn't have like literally what 6, almost 7 years of experience before self-managing myself, you know what I mean? But yeah, I first started off interning at the first label that I signed to. Like basically I put it basically like it was like a not a clause, but like I basically was like, I'm not signing unless I get an internship. They like basically forced them to like let me get an internship. So while I was like making my first record. So like when I got signed and I had to move to New York to make the record because my producer lived out there. So it's like, yeah, I'll go to New York for a couple months and just like make this record. And like in the meantime, in between, I interned at the label. So yeah, I learned a lot just through that initially. Then just started working with like other artists on the side and yeah, just kind of like grew from there.
So a lot of times, things that like whenever artists leave their dropped from their labels, it seems like there's a lot of correlation between like creative conflict, labels sort of wanting one thing for an artist and the artist not wanting their creative vision to be like constrained. I'm kind of curious what your stance on that is like, and whether or not that was going on when you were with XL, and then if that, how you feel that affected your music that you made after the fact.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the whole thing with like XL is just like so tricky. I think everyone's situation, like when they get dropped or like when um they have like, first of all, I never would have like described, I don't think I've ever have described like my situation in XL like a conflict. I think like what happened was I was so young um and didn't have confidence, basically didn't have the confidence to kind of like stick up for myself as like an artist and like how I imagine myself as an artist, and also didn't have confidence that like my first record would like actually do well, because that's a rarity within itself, you know what I mean? So I kind of like went in thinking that like, okay, I'll like do this like first record in like an experimental way, or look at it as an experimental thing for me, even though I knew that like deep down in my heart I like really just wanted to do indie rock. um but like, the record had good production and it was catchy. I was like, whatever. So like maybe you get my foot in the door, maybe it'll like make a dent. And then after that record, I can like do something else. You know what I mean? I didn't think that it will kind of like become this like kind of like weird cult classic, basically. You know what I mean? So obviously, naturally, a label will want artists to do something that like already worked. You know what I mean? And so I don't demonize them for that. I think if anything, and like I talked to Excel about this and we had a conversation this past summer about it, and it's like, if anything, like the only thing that like I guess was kind of frustrating for me is that like I didn't know the exact like the what was kind of like the breaking of the straws, which was like tensions between my management and the label, which I didn't know, and everyone kept me out of it. And like that was like really frustrating because I felt that tension, but like I didn't know. And so obviously I internalized that and like really thought that it was like me, you know what I mean? But definitely that's why it's important to have the right management, because like that could be like the last straw between like artists and the labels. Like if the label and the management aren't, on good terms or like having like a good time like working with each other. But then on top of like me wanting to do something completely different sonically, like it just realistically it just made the most sense that they dropped me. And honestly, I look at it as a blessing. I always said I look at it as a blessing because like what a lot of other labels will do is just keep you deadlocked in a contract and then you can't release at all. So like them dropping me really gave me the opportunity to like really go forth and just like be the artist that I always wanted to be, or that I, you know, kind of like pictured myself being. And I did that full force.
You going separate ways with your label, and then right after dropping your first self-release project that obviously was released to some of your most critical acclaim, was a lot of that project's subject matter and also just the influence behind that project, was a lot of that influenced by you parting with your label? Did you almost feel like you wanted to make something that was like, and it was like almost like an expression of DIY?
Well, I mean, which one? Like the last self-titled or any of like the low-key ones before that? Like which one are you talking about? Because definitely the last one wasn't. I mean, I was so far removed by then. You know what I mean? Like I had initially just threw hope out there with just like this like weird cult thing. It's not even on streaming, but they sold out of just like 500 fucking pressings of on vinyl. So it's like this like weird cult Shamir record that's like out in the world on like vinyl, but like not on streaming. And then after that, like I had did Revelations, and that kind of like felt more like my sophomore follow-up, even though it was technically my third record. And that obviously I think touched a lot on like my previous experiences, just like in industry and like starting out in the industry and breaking into the industry. But that was like released on a label, which I think was definitely like needed because I still was not ready to like really strike out on my own at that point. And then also like the label that released the Father Daughter were just like really big fans and like supporters and everything. But like the opening track of like that record, Game specifically, is like specifically about my experience. Like there's a line in there where I go, the like the screaming girls will go away. I'll make up the difference when I play, or like something like that, which is like literally just about like how I was like kind of like getting fed up by like all this constant smoke, you know, been blown, but like not feeling fulfilled as an artist, and people, and also just like being frustrated that people couldn't see through kind of like this facade that I had put on to just sustain that one era, you know what I mean? But like the last record that I released, the self-titled, no, I'm so far removed from that by then that like none of those songs reflect that time. And like, I'm just so removed from it then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I was kind of speaking on more like Hope, like directly, like the subject matter on Hope is kind of what I was referring to.
I think Hope, oh, you know, I don't know, because like Hope, I literally was like mad. Like I was like literally like in a state it's just like beautiful prison. An artist on the, know what I mean? And like that's really what that is. And then I think I kind of like hone in on the articulation in Revelations because I finally had a clearer head and like understood what was going on, and like also just finally saw a future for myself basically. But like Hope is just pure chaos. Like I mean, I'm sure like if I sit down and like diagnose each individual song, like it might have like certain deeper meanings to me, but like I don't think it really necessarily like tethered to like anything. It was just like just pure cathartic energy.
Would you say you were kind of reinventing yourself with every new project that you release, like kind of like exploring like new sensations or new sounds or new just like forms of expression with every time like you released?
Yeah, I think with every project I release, I feel like it's different, and I feel like it goes through. Yeah, I'm not scared to like switch it up. Even like guitar bass, I just think that like the new cohesive thing is just that instead of like having more electronic based pop music like ratchet like all of my songs start off just like me on guitar, which is like what feels most comfortable for me as far as like songwriting and how I always kind of like want to write, you know what I mean? Like I just sang last night to my friend, who's also a musician and a guitarist and everything. He actually teaches guitar. But he was like making fun of me because I was like, hey, this is gonna like be the like most single thing I've ever said in my life, but like I literally like sleep with my guitar. Like now that I'm single, like literally, and I have like a queen size bed all by myself. Like I literally have my guitar on the other side because like I also get a lot of my ideas like at night. Like I'm an insomniac creator, so yeah, I love to just like write with my guitar, and like that's like my biggest songwriting tool, and I always have to have it near me because I never know when like inspiration will strike, and especially at night.
It's so weird how I
Um,
all of a sudden.
yeah.
Um, just one more thing, like, can you talk a little bit about like how like was because when you do get these ideas, I know like for a lot of musicians who are just starting out, you get these ideas and you're like, okay, I got this idea. How do I put it to paper? How do I like actually like formulate it into an actual expression or a song? So I don't know. Can you just talk a little bit about your process with like writing your ideas down and stuff?
Yeah, it's really changed over time because like when I was younger, I I don't, my songwriting process these days are just like a little bit more sporadic. It's like not really like straightforward because like when I was younger, I was really kind of just like so I also was talking to my friend about this last night as well. Like I think I'm the type of person who just like gets like just like hit in the back of the head with inspiration and then just kind of like spill. I don't think I've ever like really been the person just like I'm gonna sit down and write a song, even though I kind of did for the first time for this newer stuff that I'm like working on right now, just because this is kind of like the first record where I worked from titles on because it's like kind of a concept record, but I never been just kind of like, okay, I'm going to sit down and like write a song. And that goes to like why I have to like kind of like keep a guitar in like every room because I never know when like inspiration is going to strike. And then when it does, I usually just hear full songs in my head. So normally, like what I do is I just like figure out kind of like the chord and like the chord progressions, and then I just kind of turn on my phone recorder and put that down, and then just kind of just like hum the melody in the chord while playing the chord progression, and then kind of like fill in the lyrics afterwards, like once I kind of have like a good grip on like what the melody and like the chord progressions and how they kind of like marry. But then sometimes I will just kind of like, have a lyric idea and like write like some lyrics and then write a melody around the lyrics if I feel like really compelled to. And just kind of have like a bunch of like note apps of just like stanzas, maybe even like kind of like poems, or just like lyrics that like I did hear a melody in my head for. I wrote them down, but I wasn't like I was probably like out and about or like wasn't near my guitar. And then like when I get back, like figure it out. But I generally like to like complete a song in one sitting. Um, And I used to be like, if I didn't complete a song in one sitting, then it wasn't meant to be, and I would never return to it, which is like really crazy for me to think about, and like really so like not chill with me. So I've kind of like been a little bit more open to like my songwriting process as I got older because like On My Own was like a song that like old me would like gave up on because like I had wrote the progression and like the music um, in one sitting, but for the love of me, could not figure out the lyrics. And I wrote the lyrics a year after I had just like a full instrumental demo, just like organized and arranged completely out, but just like could not write the lyrics till like a year later. But I always kept returning to it because I knew it was special. And so that is like kind of like my my biggest like beacon of like Shamir, if you don't finish a song in one sitting, it's not the end of the world. Like, calm down. Just like, you know, return to it if it feels right. And if it don't feel right, returning to it. At least you try it. Like, you're not just completely writing it off like I would have.
Speaking a little bit more about like sort of like your process, and one thing that actually kind of stood out to me on the most recent self-titled record was like these like just strange little like interludes and like the bits that you have in there, like the Jungle Pussy G. I can't remember what the other ones were. But those are just, they just like stood out to me. I don't know. It's felt like a interesting special little quality to the record that would like just kind of pulled it all together as like this sort of home baked kind of like just very like self-fulfilling type of album. And I was kind of curious like what your ideas were behind those, if they were just like random things that kind of came up in the studio and got recorded and you threw them in there, or if it was like ideas that you guys had.
No, so, you know, one thing that I always wanted to do, and like it just worked out perfect for this record, and I'm glad that it did, but I always love like little spoken interludes, especially I think like hip hop records do it really well. And I love when it's done really well in like hip hop records and everything. Um and so it worked out really perfectly for this one because like this is probably like my most coming of age like type of record to me. Like that's why like it's subtitled. It feels like just very like kind of like starting a new chapter. Um and kind of like me, you know, finally like making this declaration after like completely like honing in on like who I am as an artist. And so those clips were actually really old. They were kind of like from what should have been a little bit more of a coming of age time for me, like when I was like 19, 20, right after I got signed XL, right before the regular came out. And like, it was just like this sweet spot of my life where like, we knew my shit was about to get changed forever, but we didn't know how much. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like the last era of like where I kind of had like this like free spiritness about me. And I kind of like, whenever I go back to those clips, I kind of just like hear it in my voice and I almost sound like a different person to me. And it almost feels like a different person to me during that time. Because like after all the regular, it's just like I was not the same naturally. So yeah, so those just take me back to kind of like another coming of age time of like my life. So like bringing that coming of age time of my life to this one and been able to like make it fit with the project in like a really cool and cohesive way. Just like
That's really awesome.
perfectly. Yeah.
That's so interesting how you, because I was really curious as to why you self-titled it, and I think that makes a lot of sense. That, like you were talking about, it's kind of like a coming of age record, and I can definitely hear that. And one other thing I think is interesting about like where it fits in the like timeline of Shamir's music is the fact that like to me it almost seems like a turning point. Do you feel like this, or maybe a couple years ago, what do you think's been like your biggest career turning point so far?
I would say self-titled. I would say that there's like obviously the beginning Ratchet, right? And then Hope Revelations, which I think of as like sister records. I think they both kind of like set the bar of like, okay, Shamir does not do electronic bass pop music anymore, like, and don't expect it anymore. And that it's a form of music that also I can consistently do. You know what I mean? I think even though I had released Hope and Revelations in the same year, I think a lot of people were like, okay, but like, can he grow from this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is indie rock like limiting to him because like he could be doing so much more in the like electronic field? Because like even I would be the first to admit that like yes, obviously like electronic music is a lot more vast, but I'm the type of person that actually works best with constraints. So like um yes, like indie rock and guitar based music is like where I thrive. And I think I've made that clear even in the like low key records that I did that I didn't have a promotional cycle for. But I think by the time I had kind of like come back with with self-titled, a lot of those people that maybe like weren't following along on like the more low-key releases that I did up to that point between like Revelations and self-titled, they're like, oh, like he is growing. Like he can still like make something just as expansive as like Ratchet, but like still within like this like normal, you know, the guitar based indie rock kind of like model or like sound sonically or like whatever. So yeah.
Do you look to anyone specifically for like guitar tones, like Jimi Hendrix, Prince, anyone like that? Like,
Um, for guitar tones, I actually take a lot from like grunge. Like I like the distortion of grunge. Actually, my pedal board, I use two different types of distortions. They had that mostly grunge and shoegaze. Um, I I yeah, I have one reverb pedal, but like the second distortion that I have kind of gives this kind of like fuzzy shoegaze vibe. I don't really use it for like in the metal way because it's like the metal zone. I don't really use it like in the metal way. Um, but yeah, I would say shoegaze and grunge. Yeah, for sure. I like the like so because to me I think of myself as a rhythm guitarist that like I think of my guitar as like a pad, like a sound pad. I'm not like a shredder. I'm actually really bad at um like playing leads or like playing like single note. I'm like a rhythm guitarist and line and it's like making these like pads with the chords that I play and like strumming all the strings and like seeing what like kind of frequencies and like everything that I can get through my chords. So and that's what I love about shoegaze because it kind of is like that. But then I also love like the roughness and distortion of like grunge stuff. And I'm really married to like the higher frequencies of things. Like even the stuff that like I mix myself like is always like super bright. And I don't know, it might be because of like my voice and I'm so used to like EQing my voice and like everything. But yeah, I really like high pitch, distorted, like higher end sounds and like that's grunge music. Like that's all grunge, you know what I mean?
So moving away from that a little bit, one of the biggest things that we haven't really touched on yet, and like that was coming up in research and like just listening to your music, is a lot of gender identity and like just kind of how you relate to the world. And I saw this one article specifically that really struck me that described you as it was a post-gender pop star. And I was kind of curious whether you feel like that is a beneficial label, or if you feel like there's like, you know, a sort of counterintuitiveness to like being fully accepting if we constantly have to like, you know, put people in boxes and be like, oh, they're a post-gender pop star when they can't just like, instead of just like letting them exist, you know? And I just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Post-gender is baloney. Y'all gotta remember, I'm old. I like young, but like I'm old. You know what I mean? Like I'm 26, and I came out when I was 19, and 2014, 2015. You know what I mean? Like, you know, how were y'all? Like 12, 13, 13, 14? You know, at this time, the term non-binary was just like not in the the mainstream lexicon. It just wasn't. So they supplemented it with post-gender. It was just pure laziness. It just like, and by this time I was openly identifying as non-binary, but like it wasn't a term that people were like used to yet. Like that's how old I am. You know what I mean? Like I gotta have to like take a lot of like those punches early on because it just really wasn't any other like kind of like mainstream / burgeoning mainstream like pop artists that like openly identified as non-binary. And so and I constantly had to talk about that. It was rare that I would talk about my music. And then they just started using post-gender and slapping that on everything, on multiple articles and everything. And it was just really lazy and really annoying. And I'm so glad we moved past that. And I think a lot of those articles and a lot of those writers are like gonna like look back and be like, oh my God, like this is embarrassing.
How has it felt in the 2010, like late 2010s and like early these past couple of years, seeing like people like Dorian Electra starting to like come out and like really like hit some strides with people, or even like people as mainstream as like Halsey starting to like use like different pronouns, opting into she, they, like that's like a huge thing that's kind of been like really starting to become prominent in just like mainstream culture.
I think it's great. I think, I am more than happy to kind of like, like I do see myself as like one of those like early people that like, kind of had to like die for those sins for the other, for the others. Like I'm more than happy to like take those lashings for it to be an easier time for other people now. And now in turn, it is easier for me now. And especially in a way that I kind of like left and then kind of came back, you know what I mean? And now I'm just like back in like easier and cooler waters, and people actually talk about my music because like me being non-binary is not this weird cool thing anymore, you know what I mean? Like so yeah, no, I think it's great. And I hope all those like post-gender conversations that I had was worth it.
That's so awesome. I like how you described it, like you were, taking the hit for other people. And I think that's true in a lot of ways. Another thing too, and kind of just keeping with the theme of how people were characterizing you and your music. One term that I would see a ton, or not a term, but just a trend, was people trying to like pin down your voice. And it seems to me that nobody ever really could. Like there was never a correct term. I was wondering, do you have a term to pin down what you think your vocal style is? Like I heard a lot of like countertenor. I heard all kinds of stuff, but I'm just curious what you think it is.
Well, technically, I am countertenor. Like that's like if I was in an opera, that's what they would categorize me as. Um, but that's only because I'm an assigned male at birth person, and um, I think at the end of the day, I'm just a classic soprano. Like, you know what I mean? Like, call a spade a spade. Like, you know what I mean? I think that there definitely are masculine qualities to my voice, but I mean, I highly doubt that like anyone who's like listening to me, if they don't know like what I look like, that they would just automatically like assume that like I was assigned male at birth. You know what I mean? Um, so I think that term is like definitely the technically correct term, but like, I don't really get the Prince stuff. I mean, I don't like when people describe my voice as falsetto because obviously it's not. Like this is how I sound. Like I'm not straining to be up here, you know what I mean? And like that's like what falsetto is, you know what I mean? And like for all that time, I was smoking. I quit smoking cigarettes just a year ago. All the time I was smoking cigarettes, like the thought of me hitting falsettos was just out of the question. Like, you know what I mean? And so that was always frustrating. It's just like, no, I just have a naturally high pitched voice. Um, and so that's why I didn't really like the Prince as well, because obviously we all know that that like man's voice was like deep as hell, and like he mostly just sang in falsetto. Um, and I kind of like the Nina Simone comparisons, even though tone wise we're as opposite as it can be, her having a deeper voice and me having a more higher pitched voice. But there are a lot of kind of like vocal inflections that like, yeah, I did take from Nina Simone and learn from Nina Simone, because like Nina Simone is like one of the first singers that I could like consciously remember hearing and like listening to, because like my mom would listen to her when I was in the womb. Like my mom just like always loved and was like obsessed with Nina Simone. And I think she discovered her like when she was pregnant with me, and would just like listen to her a lot throughout my pregnancy, or not my pregnancy, her pregnancy. Um, and um, and just yeah, just remember growing up listening to a lot of Nina Simone. So like when that started to get pointed out, I thought that was really cool, because I think those people are at least attempting to like really listen. But one of the more rarer descriptions that I actually really love and like actually do stand by and like actually hear, it might be kind of like a stretch, but like I like it because like I do think, even though I don't necessarily sound like these two people, I think the way that my voice is and the way that it sits, I can easily sing songs from both of those people and still like have it sound correct, but like still, you know, it's me. And like someone said that my voice sounded like a mixture of Whitney Houston and Billie Holiday. And like that was like, I was like, first of all, ever being compared without trying. So Whitney Houston is already like, yes. And it also like me actually just like, because to me, my biggest like vocal influences growing up, like I learned how to sing, like listen to like a lot of those like vocal jazz singers like Nina Simone, like Billie Holiday, like Bessie Smith. Like I was obsessed with like those like jazz, older jazz blues singers of like the earlier times. And so I think I just naturally have like a lot more like jazzier like inflections in my voice because of that. So yeah, I really like that because I do think I have like the ability, you know, the range to sing a Whitney Houston song, but also the restraint to like sing like a Billie Holiday song.
That's super interesting to me, and it's funny. This kind of just came to mind when you were talking. Oh, actually, no, yeah, yeah, because you know Lance. So I was talking to Lance, and we were talking about like unconventional sounding people, and we were talking about like the contrast between like a conventionally good singer and then like somebody who has an interesting voice. And we were talking about how those like aren't mutually exclusive. And he brought up you, and he was saying like, yeah, Shamir doesn't have like a very like conventional voice, but and I was saying, yeah, that's part of what makes it so interesting. And then he was telling me about how like because he was talking about how when he was in choir in high school, how they would try to get him to sing a certain way, and then he was like, yeah, Shamir told me they did the same thing. Was that like, can you talk a little bit about that? That's interesting to me.
Yeah, you know, that's like really funny because like, yeah, I knew that I had like a unique voice even back in like middle school. So I didn't do choir in middle school or high school. I thought about it for a second in high school. But then the high school choir teacher hated me. He literally bullied me. And it's been kind of like a weird time because I found out like through the grapevine that he actually died this year, which was like a time. But yeah, he actually like caused me like a lot of like irreversible trauma just like around my voice because like he he basically thought that I was like trying to talk like this and like would like make me like purposely like sing lower out of like my register. And like I can't get down there if I want to, you know what I mean? Like definitely like no like bass notes of like baritones, but like a lower tenor, you know what I mean? Like and I did it for a long time, ended up like losing my voice. And that wasn't even because I was in choir, that was because I had like did West Side Story. And he was like, it sounds like there's a girl in the sharks, like you need to sing fucking lower. And I lost my fucking voice. And then I just dropped out of the fucking play because like I didn't care that much. And so yeah, like I got like bullied by like this adult man at my school. Like it's really bad. And then like I remember when I had like my first like professional vocal lesson by like someone who's like worked with like D Drakes. And I was like, and I remember one of the first things that I ever asked him, and like by this point, what, it had been like a year, maybe a year and a half since I graduated high school, you know what I mean? But I was still so like like traumatized from the way that this quote unquote vocal professional used to like talk about my voice that one of the first things that I asked this vocal coach was like, do you think I'm straining to like sing like in this register? Like it feels comfortable to me, but like I've been told that like not actually like my voice isn't supposed to like not actually be this high and like blah 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 blah. And he was like, no, he's like, you will actually hurt yourself if you like try to sing lower. Like I could, if you want to sing lower, I could teach you how to do it like properly, but like as of right now, no, you will like literally hurt yourself. And I'm like, okay, yes, because I did. You know what I mean? Like, And so it's just like, obviously, it's frustrating too, because then it's just like, okay, like this man didn't even like try to like pay attention to my voice. Like it was just obviously like rooted like probably in homophobia, and was just like, you just because like you're a Saint Melibert, like your voice should not naturally sound like this, which is like psychotic. Like there's a lot of high pitched male voices. Like anyway, yes.
I think that's so cool though that you're like, do you find yourself consciously trying to break down gender norms in terms of just voices? Because I feel like there's a lot of stigma just concentrated in vocal ranges when we don't think about the fact that like what somebody's vocal range is kind of objective. It can really be anything. Like it's not like, I don't know. I think there's too discrete of like a standard of what somebody's voice needs to be.
I just want to sound like myself. And I think that's what I always hone in on as I like further me being a singer. I think why a lot of people were like trying to like learn how to sing bigger songs with someone else, like the person singing them and like everything, like I always like focus on creating like my own vocal style and like and you know it goes without its influences, or it doesn't go without its influences. I mean, like obviously, you know, people can hear the Nina Simone, um but like to me, like I like to say that like kind of like my personal vocal Bible is A, this is psychotic, but A, Nina Simone, um, B, Bjork, and then C, Lana Del Rey. And as annoying as she is now, and as often as she lets us down, she has a huge influence on me. She kind of was like, you know, obviously she's the newer of the two, so it wasn't like she was always a forever vocal influence on me. But by the time she came around, that's like when I started getting into pop music. She's one of like the first like pop artists I really got into, because like beforehand I didn't listen to pop. Like I only listened to like country and like indie rock and like punk and like hardcore shit. Didn't listen to pop like at all really until high school, because like I didn't realize that there was like, oh, all pop, you know what I mean? Like pop to me was just like everything you hear on the radio. And then in high school, like Marina and Diamonds, Lana Del Rey, you know, well, the Talia Kills, like they all started to like kind of like really come forward with like, you know, this like really cool like all pop sound. And that's when I was like, oh, like this is cool, this is great. And what I love about Lana Del Rey is that she can change textures in her voice really easily. Like she can go like into like lower, like brooding, kind of like, you know, deep husky, I've been smoking cigarettes all day, like jazzy, sexy voice. And then like go up to like the baby voice in like 2 seconds, you know what I mean? Like and then like even do something like a little bit more raspier. Like she just plays with the textures of her voice. And so she kind of like gave me the inspiration and the confidence to do that myself, because I knew that I could kind of like isolate certain textures in my voice, because there's a lot of different textures just in my voice, just me singing straightforward, you know what I mean? And through Lana, I kind of learned how to like isolate them for certain parts to like give, I guess it's like texture and variety to my performances when needed.
I feel like every person like goes through like some sort of musical awakening, and whether that's just like listening to more music or actually getting involved in like trying to make music, and that can be subjective to like any revolving around all types of like music expression. But like, would you say that like when you like kind of dipped your toe in the water and like tried different tastes of pop and like all that other stuff, like do you think that went hand in hand with like you actually getting invested in wanting to do music for a career or for your life?
Well, honestly, I never thought that I would actually like be a professional musician like on this level. Like that really happened by accident, because you know the story goes like I kind of like jokingly sent my demo, like wholesale my demo via email to who would then be like my first management and production team because they had run a small label that, mind you, I only had heard about that small label because of a noise punk band that was on the label. And I was like, wouldn't it be funny to like send in one of my favorite noise punk band labels, like these cute little bedroom pop songs that like I've been doing? Like it was completely a joke. Like I was like, they're not gonna respond because like these are like stupid bedroom pop songs. But I was kind of like actively like at that time cold sending demos to very small tape labels that will just like do a small tape run for me just to get to my mom. That was literally my goal. Like, and then it snowballed into me in front of you right now, basically. Like from then on, that label actually like saw it, respond, flew me out to New York. We did a few songs. XL heard it. They signed me, and this was all just like within less than a year. By the time I think literally maybe like around like the year anniversary that I had like sent that initial like email, On the Regular came out.
I do like how you brought up like you wanted just your mom to hear it.
Yeah.
Like there's so much stigma, especially now in the music industry, like that when you make music, you're like, I need something that appeals to the masses, that everyone's going to like. And then like I feel like in my case too, since I'm studying piano at school, I kind of want to like make stuff that like only if a certain small group of people with like a couple friends, my family, and my professors or something, if they hear it, like I'm happy. And that's like really interesting that you brought that up because like that's what your goal was, to like make something
Yeah.
your
And
mom
like,
I'm proud.
yeah, and like also like I wasn't against a career in music, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't not something that like I like thought about. But it seemed so far-fetched. It seemed like big dreaming, you know what I mean? It's like it never it never was something that like I'm gonna go for. I think maybe eventually I would have been like a little bit more like I'm gonna go for it, but I wasn't, and it kind of just all happened accidentally. And I think that also plays a huge part as to like why my beginnings were like so rocky, because like that entire time I was not ambitious. I didn't know what it was like to be ambitious, and I felt, because it felt like an accident, I had a lot of um, imposter syndrome, and I felt fake because it's just like people work years and hard to like get to like where I got, and I got here randomly after a cold email, you know what I mean? And so that was like really frustrating, because I think if I would had entered the industry at a time where I was ambitious, like maybe if I had like the ambition that I have now, and like fully took the time to like understand myself as an artist and like fully, had the confidence, then I wouldn't have said yes to like certain things I said yes to in the beginning. But it's just like I didn't know myself as an artist, barely knew myself as a person. I was 19, you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't even have been done with college at that age, you know what I mean? So like yeah, I think that like definitely like played a role. Like I really just finally kind of like started actually having any kind of ambition about my career like literally last year. Like for self-titled. But beforehand I kind of just rolled with the punches. It was just like I'm here.
Do you have anything to say to like people who are trying to get into music? Because I know that they probably had that goal, like I'm gonna be super ambitious and like sign up for everything and get every gig I can, so then I can make it one day. Like, and then you're on here saying, "Oh, I'm just kind of joking around," and I kind of got inspired. Like, I know it's not that serious. Like, people shouldn't be like, "That's how she did it," like, or "That's how he did it." Like, how is that possible? You know, like, so is there anything you can say to like put them at ease, and like tell them that like things take time or chance is a thing?
Well, I'm kind of one of those annoying spiritual people. I was raised by a hippie. I can't help it. And I really think it is a balance of actively manifesting things or manifesting things just eternally and putting energy out into the universe and actually, doing the footwork and going out and signing up for a bunch of things, like everything. I think it's really easy to be the overly ambitious person and burn out. We've seen it a lot, right? Like we've seen it a lot. And so I don't always recommend that. I think taking the time to really understand who you are as an artist, be open and understand that you don't know it all and that you probably don't know anything. Listen, learn, and you just kind of like find your way. You know what I mean? Like I would have been in a much worse off situation after I got dropped had I not humbled myself early on. It was like, okay, but I want to intern. You know what I mean? Like that to me paid off more than me kind of just like blindly being overly ambitious and just going ham. And that works sometimes for some people, but I don't think it's worth the possibility of burning myself out. So I just hone in on my art, manifest what I want to see, and put in the work when it feels like it makes sense. But I don't burn myself out. And it goes back to what we were talking about early on when I first hopped on here. It's like striking that balance between like working hard, but not burning yourself out, and like not, doing too much, and like still knowing when to stop. And like, because it is really hard to like watch other artists like burn themselves out to get like a fourth of like what I've been blessed to get, just because like I actually just like honed in on my artistry and like didn't, not said don't put myself out there, but it's just like all that energy can go into like making exceptional art, and you don't have to like do as much footwork. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would say that's perfect. That's perfect advice. Like finding that, like what we touched on a couple of times, finding that balance between working hard and not burning yourself out. And I know that that's a hard thing to do, especially now while people are still trying to get like keep inspiration up, like the drive to like pursue a career in something that can be taken away like that when a pandemic hits. You lose your gigs, you lose your opportunity to make money, you lose your money, you have no ambition to make music anymore. It's not that serious. Like some people are like, I'm in it for the music, and some people are like, I'm in it for the money. And that's just like, it's something to consider when like trying to get into this career, is that it can have a toll on yourself, and if you're not careful, it can take away all of your inspiration and all of your love.
And that's another thing, like you got to do this for you first.
Yeah.
Like I would not recommend a music career. You know what I mean? Yeah. Unless you really, really love it. Like this shit's not stable. Like I would it's just my worst enemy. Like, you know what I mean? So like when I kind of like come across people who kind of just like want to do music to be famous or like for clout or like whatever, I'm like, you're not gonna last long. It's like, this is hard. It's not really worth it. Like you are better off getting clout and famous for doing something. Like you're better off doing like trying to become like Instagram famous or something. I swear it's much easier and less work. Like don't like really try to do a music career unless you like really just like want to do music, and like you have to do it for yourself first. And like I do music for myself first, and like that's another, there's so many layers as to like why I had such a rocky start, but that's another reason, is that like as you can tell just by like how I got discovered, like I just did music for myself initially. And it was kind of like that for Ratchet. Like I wrote everything on Ratchet, but obviously I did a lot of compromises production wise, but kind of like justified it by saying this is experimental. Like at least I'm still writing everything myself. You know what I mean? But then kind of like after that, feeling the pressure of having to like do something similar, following that up, I knew I wouldn't be able to do that in good faith or like in good conscience and like still feel like the artist that I like saw myself as. Um and so after kind of like I got dropped, the blow up, Hope and like everything, like Hope was kind of like, you know, as I said, complete catharsis. That's why I almost kind of like feel so like in a weird way like disassociated from it. Um, but Hope was kind of like the first time where I ever like made art completely for catharsis and like for me first. Yeah, and I think me making art for myself first and then putting it out there for others to partake in, I think that in a weird way makes it more accessible. Like I think saying I do music for myself first feels like a little deeply selfish, especially if you don't kind of like at least try to make it accessible. Like I do keep in the back of my head that like I want to present my art as accessible as possible because I want people to kind of like vibe with and like kind of also relate to the things that I've personally gone through or the things that like I personally feel. But I do music for me first. And basically every release after my debut has been for me first. And whoever resonates with it, it resonates with them. And that's even better. You know what I mean? But making music has just been, it is just like an integral part of just like my mental health. Like I don't, it's really the only way that I can like really healthily express myself like this. Like I don't, if I didn't have music, I don't know what I would be doing or like what probably other unhealthy ways I'll be expressing myself. You know what I mean?
Can you talk about Running a little bit from the last LP? I was really curious as to the subject matter of that song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that song was also another kind of like, at this time I knew that I was like dropped from Excel and like everything, but like that song is kind of like about a time like me knowing that, but like contributing to kind of like the hope kind of like mental breakdown of hope. Because like also on top of that, you know, I had just moved to Philadelphia and I what had the only people that I knew out there, like my only group of friends was just like a bunch of like fucking bonehead straight dudes who were like fine, but like I don't know, it just like really took a toll on me, just like being around all of that, like not to say they were inherently toxic, that masculinity is inherently toxic, but like there was a lot of toxic masculinity, you know what I mean? And so just like being affected by that, but then also like just always been the odd one out, because I, you know, wasn't a cis male, and kind of like kind of subconsciously like forcing myself to like appear a little bit more masculine than like I maybe would be comfortable with, just because just so I didn't like stick out from the group. Not that they would care, but then like I would, you know, see other people around us like stare and it's just like what's up with this one? You know what I mean? And that was kind of like the first time that I ever really kind of like experienced like just like a real kind of like strife within my gender. Like I had always been just very, you know, I was out and, you know, comfortably identifying as non-binary, like whatever. And I never, and like I would, you know, present masculine when I want to, present feminine when I want to, but like, I don't know. And obviously all the dudes that I was around like completely understood that. But I think it's really hard to stand out when you're like in a group of dudes and you go to another group of dudes and like you know that your group of dudes are like comfortable with you, but you don't know that the other group of dudes that we're meeting up with are like comfortable with you. And then it's like this extra anxiety that is just not there. If I was like at the very least, like in a group that had more than one other like LGBTQ person in it, you know what I mean? And kind of just by default, because like, I guess for the most part, I was like their one, you know, at least very visually LGBTQ friend. a lot of like that anxiety with like appear. So like running is kind of like me reverting back to like that time and like me basically like, you know, I say lose my religion, lose my sight, running with you through the night. And it's kind of like about that disassociation that I had to do to just even go out with these like group of people, so I wouldn't like have this like anxiety or like hyper focus on like the stairs or like how I was like obviously the odd one out.
That's beautiful. I think that it's beautiful. It's obviously not the subject matter, but the way you expressed it, obviously. I think that's really brave. And I could see how it'd be hard for you to relate to people like that, you know?
We related in a lot, and like that's the thing, like we related in a lot of ways. And like I think the hardest thing about like whenever I, you know, am describing a song or like whatever is that even though I'm not friends with a lot of those people or like whatever, I don't want to demonize them. Like they were my friends, and like and they just like I said, they themselves like understood like the type of person that I was, and like you know accepted that. But like I think I think it's one thing to like accept the differences of your friends, and I think it's another thing to like create this kind of like air of like or like this feeling of it being hospitable to like be yourself or like to just to be aware of it, you know what I mean? It's almost kind of like, you know, if you're hosting like a foreign exchange student, right? You kind of like want to kind of go out of your way a little bit to like make sure that they're comfortable, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, and not that I want to be treated different just because like I'm like queer or like whatever, but it's just like, you know, I'm not one of the boys at the end of the day. Like I don't want to like kind of like bullshit and like do like this kind of like normal shit that you do with your bros. You know what I mean? Like that's not, you know, I can, but I don't do that shit all the time. And like I'm a little bit more multifaceted to that. Like, you know what I mean? And it just kind of, you know, wear at you, always kind of like been the one to kind of like have to object to be like, no, I can't do that no more. Or no, I don't want to do that. Or I almost hit this one out because like I'm tired of this. Like, need to switch it up. We need to do something else. You know what I mean? So that's what it is. Like they were a fine group of people, and like I never want to like demonize them, and like that's not what the song is about. It's definitely more about me and like my journey and like that time and what that time in my life reflected within me, basically.
That's super cool. In a lot of spots in your music also, like, you know, we've kind of talked a lot about like your just like progression as an artist. Where do you see yourself going next? Like with every album, it seems like you kind of have this like reinvention of your sound, or just like a just, you know, ever changing like aura about your music. So where do you see yourself going next?
Well, the next record is done. It's being mixed right now. And without giving too much away, I will just say that, yeah, it's one of the more conceptual records. I don't think I would call it like a classic concept album, but just like I said, this is the first time where I was like writing from titles first, because every title kind of like tells the story within itself and like plays into like the concept of like the title of the record overall. And so I wanted the titles to be cohesive with that. And so yeah, that's what I would say without giving too much away. I guess it's like baby's first kind of concept record.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
To hear that just come out of your mouth, it gets me excited. All right.
Yeah, I've never done, or ever, I don't think I ever really wanted to do a concept record. It just kind of like naturally like came about. And it feels honest. Because that's the thing about concept records, right? To me, is like has to come about in an honest way, or it can come across just like really try-hardy, you know what I mean?
Like forced,
you know what I mean? Because it's a concept record. It's like you're kind of getting out of like your comfort zone in like that way to like do this super extra cohesive like thing. But this felt really natural. So yeah, hopefully
That's
that comes.
awesome. And I'm excited to hear it. But thank you so much for sitting down with us. I thought this was a great conversation. We touched on a lot of stuff. I really cannot wait to hear what you do next. And I really appreciate you sitting down with us, Shamir.
No, thank you for having me. This is
All
great.
right. Before we wrap it up, want to shout out everything else, tell everybody where they can get the record.
Yeah, I mean, the record is everywhere. I mean, all the physicals are sold out, sorry, but you can stream everywhere. And yeah, just like I said, the clothing is called Bipolar Butterfly. So I'm sure that'll be out by the time it comes out. And yeah, it's this little streetwear collection that I put together that also is like really great because proceeds from every purchase is going to be donated to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And yeah, so that's about it for right now until the next record.
Awesome. Oh yeah. All right, Shamir. It was great talking to you. Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks so much.